And so my pause, I'm going to tell a little bit about my story because it's an interesting one. I've always battled episodes of discontent, not y'all, but me. But in June 2011, it kind of hit a whole nother level for me. And it wasn't like on June 11th at 2 p.m. this switch flipped and I became discontent. It had been building for about 3 years. And for me, it was just 3 years of crappiness. I mean, that's really the only way to say it. It started, my dad was killed in a car accident in Mobile, Alabama. My mom was with him. She was in ICU for 60 days, had some touch and go moments. And that makes you think, right? I mean, many of us have been through tragedies like that. And then my mother-in-law died in her sleep not long after that, suddenly. Our daughter had a cancer scare at 10 years old. Our son went to a prestigious college, got kicked out for marijuana. That was a fun time. A 41-year-old friend of ours died of cancer. I mean, it was just all this stuff packed in 3 years. And you asked a lot of questions during that time, especially from a Christian worldview. You're asking why, where was God, those kind of things. And those were definitely on my mind. But two questions that kept coming to my mind over and over again was, what's my purpose? Because of the deaths that were surrounding that 3-year period, I was just like, life is short. What's my purpose? And not necessarily at a huge macro level, Paul McGinnis, what's his purpose? What am I meant to do with my skills and abilities and experience? And then the other thing was, am I making a difference? Am I making a difference? And it was just this kind of smoldering discontent. My coach called it smoldering discontent, which I thought was a great phrase, that just gnawed at my soul. And at the time, I was vice president of marketing for Ecolab in their food safety division in Las Colinas. Great company. I had 4 different teams. We were doing a lot of creative things and doing a lot in the whole food safety restaurant industry and things. And I loved what I did, but then as I kind of went through this phase, it just became less and less important. And launching a new product or publishing a new magazine or whatever we were doing at the time just didn't have the same sex appeal. It just wasn't as energizing anymore. And it really bothered me because I thought something must be wrong. Here I have a great job, I have a corner office, I have stock options, I have all these things that if I went and complained to you, you'd be like, buck up, you know? And so then you tend to isolate, because I sure don't want to say those things because then you're viewed as just somebody that's not grateful. And so these things, I just had these coals kind of in my soul that all these events would kind of just fan the flame and I'd get little flames. And so I was just really struggling during this time. And again, just going, wait, I should be really happy and I'm not. And I had more money than meaning. And that's really the definition of halftime, which we'll talk about in a minute. And so during this phase, I got a call from a private equity firm in downtown Dallas. And I wasn't seeking a job. I hadn't put my resume out, nothing. And I got this call. And they said, hey, we bought a company. It's in the food industry in Houston. We'd like you to come interview to run it. You'll get part ownership. We'll flip it in 3 to 5 years. I mean, it's a great opportunity. So I said, you know, maybe I just need a change of scenery. Maybe I just need something different, and that will create joy in my life. And so I went and interviewed and had 3 hours worth of interviews with all the partners. It went great. I get in my car, I'm driving back to Arlington, and it just hit me. I don't want to be president of a company. You think I'd have figured that out before I went and interviewed. But it just hit me. I don't want to do this. And that was a real huge conundrum for me because that's what I'd been working for so long. So all of a sudden, I don't want to do this. And then at Ecolab, I'm in line in HR as succeeding to be general manager of the food safety division. I'm like, 80% of that job I'll hate. And I knew I'd have to even put in more hours than what I'm doing now. And if I go to a public company, and many of you know how that is and the pressures of that, I go to this private equity firm, it's going to be just as much pressure flipping something. And I was like, I just don't know if I want to do that. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do? This is what I've been working for. I mean, this is a great opportunity. And again, I couldn't share that with a lot of people because they're like, hey, stupid, you know, shut up. And so I just began to just really kind of saying, God, I mean, it just brought me to my knees. I said, God, if you don't want me to do this, I'm completely confused. And so I just began to pray over the next couple of weeks. And what really came to me very clearly, I wish I could say it was audible or written on the wall or something. I always prayed for that. That's never happened. But it just really, he just impressed upon me that you need to wrap your mind around leaving Ecolab. Now, I don't know about you, but for a type A achiever, driven, that's so ambiguous, I don't even know what to do with that. You need to leave July 11th. you know, or you need to wait until your kids are done with college or something. This is too ambiguous. What does this mean? So typically, like a typical guy, within about an hour, I said, all right, God, I've wrapped my mind around it. Now what? And I really envision him laughing, just laughing hysterically at me, going, oh boy, you don't know the journey you're about to go on. And so I just began to really pray through, and my wife was on this journey with me, and she fortunately wasn't freaked out by this whole confusing period of time in my life. And the first thing we really felt we needed to do was to adjust financially. My wife is a school teacher in Arlington, and you know, they make really good money as school teachers in Arlington. And so I just had this sneaky suspicion that God was going to call me to either a nonprofit that didn't pay quite as well as what I was getting paid, or I would be writing letters to people like you saying, would you support me every month? I mean, I just had this feeling it was going to be that. I didn't know, but I just had this feeling. So we began to adjust financially. And we never lived high on the hog, but obviously we lived on my salary quite a bit. And so we just began to adjust. And in 6 months, we were living on my wife's salary and putting my salary in savings. We got rid of TV, we lowered our insurance premiums, we refinanced our house, I mean, all kinds of things. Instead of going and buying a new car, my 10-year-old car was okay, you know, those kind of things. And so we just adjusted, and so during that time, I applied for a doctorate at UTA in management. I thought maybe I want to teach, I love teaching. And so all this is going on in January of 2012. I'm like, all right, God, I adjusted financially, now what? Well then, after the financial adjustment, it was identity. And I would have much rather gone back to financial adjustment, let me tell you. That was much easier than identity. And he just really got the sandpaper out on me and began to think, you know, your identity is in your job, and it's not in me. And at first I was like, no, it's not. I could leave this thing tomorrow. But then you start digging a little deeper. And I loved telling people my title. I loved having the company car. I loved the golden handcuffs that had been firmly attached 3 or 4 years before that. I loved talking to somebody over coffee about our stock options. I mean, it was just pride, and my identity was in it. And he said, no, your identity needs to be in me. And I have not arrived at my identity in God, so don't hear that. But from January till April was this time for me where just incredible growth, where I really had to detach my identity from what I did to who I was in Christ. And on April 15th, I remember it like it was yesterday. It's 2012. April 15th in 2012 was a Sunday. Some of you know that because you're sick like that and you do taxes, and so you had an extra day. It's 10, you know who you are. It's 10:30 at night. Marianne, my wife, is asleep next to me, and I'm praying through it like I've been doing, and it was as clear as God has ever spoken to me. He said, you need to leave Ecolab and you need to leave tomorrow. And I had the same reaction about half of you had. You know, come again? You know, what is this exactly? And it was overwhelming. And so I wake up Marianne, I go, hey, just so you know, I really feel like God's telling me to leave Ecolab tomorrow. And she goes, great. And she turns back over to go to sleep. And I'm like, no, wait a minute. You don't understand it. And I tap her again. And she's like, what? Why are you hesitant? And I go, well, I thought I was going to leave to go teach or go get my doctorate, and that sounds really cool. Or I was going to go lead a nonprofit, or I was going to do something amazing, which again is an identity issue, but that's what I thought. And I said, I'm leaving because God told me to leave. And I said, you don't understand Ecolab's culture. I will be ridiculed for this. And she looked at me, and I don't know if any of you men can attest to this. It's like the Holy Spirit came out of my wife's voice. Many times the Holy Spirit sounds like my wife's voice. And so this was one of those moments, 11 o'clock at night on April 15th, and she looks at me and she goes, so let me get this straight. It's the truth, isn't it? Yes. And she goes, when have you ever cared what people thought, especially when it came to obeying God? And then the third thing she said was, and what an incredible testimony to the people at Ecolab. You're worried about their ridicule. What an incredible testimony. And then she turned over and went back to bed. Just let me simmer on that. I didn't sleep all night. I'm thinking about what she said, which was absolutely true. And then I'm reminding God of all the things I'm sure he forgot. Healthcare. This was all when Obamacare was all over the place. You know, do you know I have unvested stock options? I mean, the golden handcuffs have just been put on. You know, all this stuff about what am I going to do? And again, I feel like he just laughed and said, you know, I got this. And so by 6:30 in the morning, if I wouldn't have gone in and quit, I think I'd have had to go to the hospital. It was physically overwhelming. And so I called my boss and said, hey, we need to get together for lunch. He just thought it was a one-on-one. We go to lunch, and he starts talking about a project. I go, Scott, I need to stop you. I said, I'm leaving Ecolab. He's like, what? He goes, who got you? And I said, well, nobody. And then I went and told him the same story I just told you guys. And he's not a believer, and his jaw was on the table, and he was pissed. He was really, really upset. And he's like, how stupid are you? He didn't hold any punches, you know, and he's like, why in the world would God tell you to leave? You have a kid that's in college. You have a kid going to college in 2 years. You have he went through the whole, mainly financial, the whole thing. He goes, we're going to have the biggest bonus year ever. We're the fastest growing division. We're going to be at the 140 payout. You have to be employed on 12/31. This is April. What are you thinking? I went through the whole thing, and I said, Scott, there's not one thing I haven't thought of. All I can tell you is God has always been faithful. I have no idea what he has planned, but I'm confident he's going to be faithful. And somebody had told me right before I did this, they said, you need to be aware. You're going to have a lot of God conversations. I said, what do you mean? They said, when somebody at your level that they know is smart and successful but does something really stupid, they can't rectify that in their minds, and they're going to ask you about it. You just need to be prepared for that. And then I gave a 6-week notice, and in that 6 weeks, I had more than 50 conversations, God conversation. It was absolutely unbelievable. Unfortunately, far more than I ever had in the 10 years I was at Ecolab. I had people come in my office going, what do you mean you heard God's voice? Freak, you know? And then the identity thing was very apparent of why God wanted me to work on my identity, because the memo went out from HR, and you guys know what these memos are like. Since I had no plans of what I was going to do, it's Paul McGinnis is leaving Ecolab to explore other career opportunities. That means you got your butt fired, right? So all these people are calling me going, what did you do? Was it sexual harassment? You know, did you embezzle money? All these things. And I'm like, no. And so I got to tell them. So anyways, incredible conversations during that time. I had a company car. They didn't even tell me. They come and got it with a tow truck. So then all my neighbors are thinking I got repossessed. I mean, all these things that God's just smiling, going, see why I wanted you to work on your identity? You know, just see. And so this 6 weeks was incredible. And during this 6 weeks, I had no idea what I was going to do. And I'm headed into this midlife sabbatical. And I go to a Sweet 16 party with my daughter. It was one of her friends. And there was about 50 or 60 people there. And there was a guy that I hadn't seen in a couple years. We were good friends a long time ago. And he said, how's Ecolab? And he kind of asked me at the wrong time. I didn't emotionally break down, but I just kind of spewed on him and go, I have no idea. I'm leaving. I have no idea what I'm going to do. I've always had a plan for my life. I'm confused. I'm frustrated. I feel like a schizophrenic. And he's just kind of going, well, I was just being courteous, you know. And then he started laughing. And he said, Paul, he goes, that's exactly where I was 4 years ago. He goes, you need to check out the Halftime Institute. I had never heard of the Halftime Institute, never heard of Bob Buford, never heard of the book Halftime. So I went to the website that night, and for the next 4 hours, I watched every video, I read every blog, I did everything, and it's like, this is like reading my email. I mean, this is exactly where I am. And so I filled out a form, and I said, I want to enroll. They have a year-long program, and I left Ecolab May 31st, and I was at the Halftime Institute on June 4th.